The cook sees an old photo and says, "Sir, this is my mother." The businessman trembles. Steam rose from the pots as Melissa organized the spices on the marble kitchen countertop. She had been working for 3 years in that house in Beacon Hill and had never seen her boss, Dr. Richard Anderson, as nervous as he was on that Thursday afternoon. He was rummaging through drawers and cabinets, looking for some important documents he had lost. The 52-year-old woman watched as he opened the old sideboard drawer, the one that was always locked. A yellowed photo slipped out and fell onto the marble floor. Melissa quickly bent down to pick it up, but when she looked at the image, she felt the world spin around her. "Sir, this is my mother," she said, her voice choked. Dr. Richard stretched out a trembling hand to take the photo back, but Melissa instinctively pulled her arm away. Her eyes couldn't look away from that familiar face, even after so many years. It was Hope, her mother, younger, wearing a white nurse's uniform, smiling next to a grey-haired lady. "Give that back to me, Melissa." "Please," asked the businessman, but his voice came out weak, almost a whisper. "How do you have a photo of my mother?" The question came out louder than she intended. "She disappeared 25 years ago. I never heard from her again." The 60-year-old man wiped his sweaty face. His legs seemed unable to support his own weight. He leaned on the counter, trying to find words that wouldn't come. It must be a coincidence. She looks like someone who worked here a long time ago," he stammered, but his eyes avoided Melissa's determined gaze. "A coincidence?" She brought the photo closer to his face. "Look here, Dr. Richard. This mark on the chin, this small scar on the forehead, this is my mother, yes, sir, and she's wearing a nurse's uniform." At that moment, Mrs. Helen, Richard's wife, entered the kitchen looking for her husband. She was about 55, with well-kept blonde hair and always wore expensive jewelry. Seeing the tense scene, with Melissa holding a photo and her husband visibly shaken, her expression changed completely. "What is going on here?" she asked in a firm voice. "Mrs. Helen, I found a photo of my mother in Dr. Richard's drawer," explained Melissa, showing the image. "My mother disappeared when I was very little. I never knew what happened to her." Helen quickly looked at her husband, then at the photo, and her face hardened. She knew that story. She knew exactly who that woman in the photograph was. "Melissa, go back to your work. Now," ordered Helen, in a tone that brooked no argument. "But, Mrs. Helen, I need to know—" "You don't need to know anything. Give that photo back and continue preparing dinner." Melissa pressed the photo to her chest. For the first time in 3 years working in that house, she disobeyed a direct order from her employers. "I won't give it back until someone explains to me how this photo got here." Silence filled the kitchen. Richard was breathing heavily, Helen was clenching her fists, and Melissa felt her heart beating so hard it hurt. After so many years without answers about her mother's disappearance, she had finally found a clue. "Richard, go to the office. I'll handle this," said Helen, but her husband didn't move. He seemed hypnotized by the situation. "Why are you both so afraid to tell me the truth?" insisted Melissa. "What was my mother doing here in this house?" Before anyone could answer, Isabella, the couple's 17-year-old daughter, entered the kitchen. She had just arrived from school and was looking for something to eat. The girl immediately noticed the tension in the air. "What's happening?" she asked, looking at the 3 adults. "Nothing, sweetheart. Go to your room," said Helen quickly. But Isabella was curious by nature and noticed the photo in Melissa's hands. She approached and managed to see the image before the cook could hide it. "Wow, what an old photo. Who are these people?" she asked innocently. "It's my mother," answered Melissa, looking directly at Richard. "She worked here in this house many years ago. Isn't that true, Dr. Anderson?" The businessman finally found his voice, but it came out hoarse and trembling. "Melissa, let's talk in my office. Helen, Isabella, please leave us alone." "No!" exclaimed Helen. "Richard, you're not going to—" "Helen, please," he interrupted her with a look she knew well. It was the same look he had when making an important business decision. Isabella realized something very serious was happening. She had grown up in that house and knew all the employees who had ever worked there, but she had never heard of a nurse named Hope. "Dad, who is the lady in the photo? Why is Melissa crying?" It was only then that Melissa realized tears were streaming down her face. 25 years of doubt, of sleepless nights wondering what had happened to her mother, of growing up without knowing if she was alive or not. "Isabella, go up to your room. Now," ordered Helen, but her daughter didn't move. "No, I want to know too. This house holds many secrets and I'm tired of not understanding anything." Richard looked at his daughter with surprise. Isabella had always been obedient and respectful, but now there was a determination in her eyes that he didn't recognize. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "All right," said Richard, taking a deep breath. "Let's all go to the living room. Melissa, bring the photo. It's time for you to know the truth about Hope Matthews." Her mother's full name, spoken aloud after so many years, made Melissa stagger. Helen gripped her husband's arm tightly, whispering something in his ear, but he shook his head negatively. In the living room, everyone sat down. Melissa chose an armchair near the window, still holding the photograph firmly. The afternoon light came through the silk curtains, creating a solemn atmosphere for what was to come. "Hope worked here for 2 years, began Richard, his voice firmer now. "She was my mother, Mrs. Margaret's nurse, who was very sick at the time. This was in the late 90s. "My mother was always a nurse," confirmed Melissa, "but she never told me where she worked. When I was 5 years old, she simply disappeared. I woke up one morning and she was no longer home." Isabella leaned forward, fascinated by the story. "What do you mean she disappeared? Didn't she leave a note? Nothing?" Melissa shook her head, trying to control her emotion. "Nothing. I only remember that in the last few days, she was very nervous. She cried in secret. I thought I didn't notice, but a child always notices when their mother is suffering." Helen stood up abruptly from the armchair. "Richard, I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. You know very well what happened back then." "What happened?" asked Melissa, standing up as well. "What do you know about my mother?" Richard gestured for his wife to sit down again, but Helen remained standing, clearly agitated. "Helen, sit down. Melissa deserves to know the truth." "The truth?" Helen let out a bitter laugh. "The truth is that your mother robbed our family and then ran away like a coward." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Melissa felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. For a moment she couldn't even breathe properly. "What did you say?" she managed to ask, her voice almost inaudible. "She stole money and jewelry from my mother-in-law," continued Helen, ignoring her husband's warning looks. "When Mrs. Margaret passed away, we discovered several valuable items were missing. Your mother disappeared that same night." Melissa stood up so quickly she knocked over a vase of flowers from the side table. The noise echoed through the silent living room. "That's a lie," she shouted, her eyes filled with tears. "My mother was not a thief. She was an honest, hard-working woman." "Melissa, please calm down," asked Richard, standing up as well. "No, I will not calm down." She pointed her finger at Helen. "You are lying. My mother would never steal from anyone. Never." Isabella was in shock. She had never seen Melissa so upset. The cook had always been calm, patient, and caring with everyone in the house. "Melissa, my mother had very valuable jewelry, and some of it disappeared after she passed away," said Richard, trying to use a softer tone. "Hope was the only person who had access to her room." "And so you accused her without proof, without even talking to her?" Helen crossed her arms. "The proof was obvious. Who else could it have been?" Melissa looked at the photo in her hands. The smile on her mother's face seemed to mock the whole situation. How could such a kind woman, who always taught her daughter the right values, have done something like that? "I don't believe it," she said, more to herself than to the others. "There's something wrong with this whole story." Richard approached her carefully, as if dealing with a wounded animal. "Melissa, I understand it's difficult to accept, but back then when it all happened, I was a 5-year-old child who lost her mother overnight." She interrupted him, her voice heavy with pain. "Do you know what it's like to grow up not knowing if your mother is alive, or if something terrible happened to her?" Isabella, who had remained silent until then, stood up and approached Melissa. "How did you manage on your own being so young?" "I went to live with my Aunt Joanne, my mother's sister. She did what she could, but she was always very poor. Melissa wiped her face with the back of her hand. Aunt Joanne died when I was 15. Since then, I've been on my own. Helen, who had sat down again, sighed deeply. Look, Melissa, I'm very sorry for everything you went through, but facts are facts. Your mother disappeared along with the valuables. What else were we supposed to think? You could have looked for her to talk. You could have tried to understand what really happened. Melissa was inconsolable. Instead, you accused her behind her back and let her live like a fugitive for the rest of her life. How do you know she lived like a fugitive? Asked Richard with genuine curiosity. Melissa hesitated. The truth was, she knew almost nothing about what happened to her mother after she disappeared. All she had were assumptions and hopes. I don't know, but I imagine that if she was accused unfairly, she must have lived in fear of being found. Melissa, said Isabella, gently touching the cook's arm, did you ever look for her when you got older? Yes, I did. For years. I went to hospitals, nursing homes, cemeteries. Her voice broke. I never found a single trace of her. Helen and Richard exchanged a meaningful look. There was something they weren't telling. What do you know about my mother's whereabouts? Asked Melissa, noticing the exchanged look. Tell me the truth. We don't know where she is, Richard answered quickly. We never heard from her again after that night. But Melissa noticed he avoided looking her in the eye when he said it. There was something more, she was sure. I want to see the other staff who worked here at that time, she said with determination. I want to talk to them. That won't be possible, said Helen. Most of them don't work here anymore. Then give me their addresses. I'll look for them on my own. Melissa, that's not a good idea, Richard tried to dissuade her. It all happened a long time ago. Why stir up these old things? Why stir them up? She stared at him with indignation. Because it's about my mother. Because it's about the truth. Isabella, who had remained thoughtful, suddenly remembered something. Dad, didn't Mrs. Carmen work here back then? She always says she's worked for our family for 30 years. Helen shot a furious look at her daughter, but Richard couldn't deny it. Yes, Mrs. Carmen has worked with us for a long time. Where is she? I want to talk to her now, demanded Melissa. She didn't come in today. Her granddaughter is sick, explained Helen, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Then I'll talk to her tomorrow, and I want to talk with all the other former employees too. Richard sighed, realizing Melissa wouldn't give up easily. All right, tomorrow you can talk with Mrs. Carmen, but I ask you to understand that all of this happened a long time ago, and people's memories might not be so clear. Memories of injustices are never forgotten, replied Melissa, carefully putting the photo back in her apron pocket. Helen stood up again, visibly irritated. Richard, I don't agree with this. You're opening a Pandora's box that should have remained closed. Why, Mrs. Helen? Asked Melissa. What are you afraid I'll discover? We're not afraid of anything, said Helen, but her voice betrayed nervousness. We just don't see the need to stir up the past. The past should only be forgotten when justice has been served, Melissa retorted. And from what I can see, justice never came close to my mother's story. Isabella looked at her parents, then at Melissa, and made a decision that surprised everyone. Melissa, I will help you discover the truth. Isabella, her parents exclaimed in unison. No, Dad. If this lady worked in our house, if she took care of my grandmother, then she was part of our family, and if some injustice happened, we have an obligation to correct it. Helen looked at her daughter as if she didn't know her. Isabella, you don't understand the complexity of this situation. Then explain it to me, said the young woman, exasperated. Explain once and for all what really happened back then. The ringing of the phone interrupted the tense discussion. Richard answered and, after a brief conversation, hung up with a worried expression. It was the office. I have an urgent meeting. Let's continue this conversation tomorrow. No, said Melissa firmly. I've already waited 25 years for answers. I won't wait another day. Melissa, please be reasonable, pleaded Richard. Reasonable? Do you think it's reasonable for a daughter to spend her whole life not knowing what happened to her own mother? Helen, losing her patience, spoke directly to Melissa. All right, you want to know the truth. Your mother not only stole the jewels but also forged my mother-in-law's signature on some important documents. When we found out, she had already run away. That's impossible, shouted Melissa. My mother barely knew how to write properly. How could she forge someone's signature? Melissa's statement made Helen hesitate for a moment. It was true that Hope had little schooling, something everyone knew at the time. Well, she must have learned, stammered Helen, clearly without a convincing answer. Richard noticed the inconsistency in his wife's statement and tried to change the subject. The important thing now is that all of this happened a long time ago. We can't change the past. But we can clarify the truth, insisted Isabella, surprising her parents again with her determination. If there was a mistake, we have to correct it. What mistake? Asked Helen, with irritation. Your mother disappeared with things that didn't belong to her. What's wrong with that? The wrong is in the way you all handled the situation, replied Melissa, regaining her composure. You condemned her without concrete proof, without giving her a chance to defend herself. Richard ran his hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. Melissa, you have to understand that back then I was very young, only 35. My mother had just passed away. I was devastated, and when we discovered her things were missing, you let other people make the decisions for you, Melissa completed, reading between the lines. Isn't that true? Richard's silence was answer enough. Who made those decisions? She insisted. Who accused my mother? Helen and Richard exchanged another meaningful look. It was his uncles, said Isabella suddenly. I've heard you talking about the uncles who always meddled in the family business when Dad was younger. Isabella, you don't know what you're talking about, scolded Helen. Yes, I do, Mum. You always whisper about how Dad's uncles were greedy and caused a lot of problems for the family. Richard looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and worry. She was more observant than he had imagined. The uncles have nothing to do with this, he said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Yes, they do, exclaimed Melissa, who was beginning to understand the situation. They were the ones who accused my mother, weren't they? And you, being in mourning and young, believed them. Richard sat down heavily on the sofa, as if the weight of years of guilt had finally become unbearable. Melissa, I didn't know what to think at the time. My mother had just died. I was confused, sad. And your uncles took advantage of your vulnerability to accuse an innocent woman, she completed. Helen approached her husband, placing a hand on his shoulder in a protective gesture. Richard, you don't have to justify yourself to anyone. The decisions we made back then were based on what we knew then. But what if you were wrong? Asked Isabella. What if Hope really was innocent? She was not innocent, insisted Helen, but her voice sounded less firm than before. Melissa approached Richard, who kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Dr. Anderson, you, deep in your heart, do you really believe my mother was a thief? He lifted his eyes slowly and met Melissa's determined gaze. For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. Finally, he sighed deeply. I always had doubts, he admitted to Helen's horror. Richard, she exclaimed. It's true, Helen. I always wondered if we hadn't made a mistake. Hope was a dedicated woman, caring towards my mother. She had never given any reason for distrust. Melissa felt her heart race. Finally, she was hearing something that sounded like the truth. Then why didn't you investigate further? Why didn't you try to find her to talk? Because my uncle said it would be a waste of time, that she was long gone and would never admit to the theft, replied Richard, his voice full of regret. And you believed them? I was young, Melissa. I had just taken over the family business after my mother's death. My uncles were older, more experienced. I thought they knew what they were doing. Helen was visibly shaken by her husband's revelations. Richard, you never told me you had doubts about this. Because I was ashamed, Helen. Ashamed that I let an innocent person be harmed because of us. Melissa felt her legs grow weak. After so many years, she was finally hearing someone admit that maybe her mother was innocent. Dr. Anderson, are you still in contact with those uncles? No. They passed away several years ago. And the documents from that time? Do they still exist? Richard hesitated before answering. Some documents are stored in the office. I never reviewed them completely. I want to see those documents, demanded Melissa. I don't know if that's a good idea, said Helen, clearly worried. Why not, Mother? Asked Isabella. If there's really nothing to hide, why not let Melissa see the documents? Helen looked at her daughter as if she were a stranger. Isabella, you don't understand the implications of all this. Then explain the implications to me, said the young woman, crossing her arms. I'm 17, I'm not a little child. Richard slowly rose from the sofa. Melissa, if you really want to see the documents, I will get them, but this has to stay between us, all right? Why? She asked suspiciously. Because if there is something wrong, if we really committed an injustice, I want to have the chance to correct it before the situation becomes public. Melissa pondered for a moment. On one hand, she wanted immediate justice. On the other, she understood that a more careful approach might be more effective. All right, but I want to see everything, all the documents related to my mother. You will have access to everything, promised Richard. Tomorrow. Helen stood up abruptly. Richard, I need to speak with you. Alone. Later, Helen. First, I'm going to get the documents. No, now. The firmness in Helen's voice made everyone in the living room turn to her. There was an urgency in her tone that did not go unnoticed. Mrs. Helen, do you know something you're not telling? Asked Melissa with suspicion. I know that stirring up old things never brings any good, replied Helen, avoiding the cook's gaze. Or perhaps you know that you made a terrible mistake and are now afraid of the consequences, retorted Melissa. I'm not afraid of anything, said Helen, but her voice trembled slightly. Isabella, who had remained observing the exchange of words, suddenly remembered something. Father, where are Grandma's jewels now? The question took everyone by surprise. Richard looked at his daughter without understanding the relevance of the question. Why do you want to know that? Because if Hope stole the jewels, they were never found, right? But if she didn't steal them, then the jewels must be somewhere else. Isabella's simple logic made Melissa realize something important. It's true. If my mother had stolen the jewels, she would have had to sell them to support herself. And if she sold them, you could have found traces of that, couldn't you? Richard and Helen exchanged another look filled with tension. We never investigated whether the jewels had been sold, admitted Richard. What do you mean you never investigated? Asked Melissa, incredulous. You accused my mother of theft but never bothered to look for the stolen jewels. At the time we thought it would be useless, said Helen. If she had really stolen them, she probably would have gotten rid of everything. Or you never investigated because you knew you wouldn't find anything, suggested Melissa, with an increasingly clear perception of the situation. The silence that followed was revealing. Neither Richard nor Helen could refute Melissa's accusation. I want the list of the jewels that were supposedly stolen, she said with growing determination. And I want the names of all the people who had access to Mrs. Margaret's room. Melissa, all this was a long time ago, tried to argue Richard. Exactly. It was a long time ago, and my mother spent all these years being considered a criminal. If she was innocent, then someone else stole those jewels. Isabella clapped her hands, excited. That's it, we have to find out who really stole Grandma's jewels. Isabella, this is not a game, scolded Helen. These are serious family matters. It's exactly because it's a serious matter that it needs to be clarified, replied the young woman with surprising maturity. Richard looked at his daughter with admiration. She was showing a determination and a sense of justice that made him proud, even if the situation was uncomfortable. All right, he said finally. I'll get all the documents I still have from that time. Let's discover the truth once and for all. Helen headed for the stairs, clearly disturbed by the direction the situation was taking. I will not take part in this, she announced. Richard, you are making a mistake. I made the mistake 25 years ago, he replied, with a firmness that surprised everyone. Now it's time to correct it. After Helen went upstairs, the three of them were silent for a moment. Melissa felt a mixture of hope and fear. She might finally discover the truth about her mother, but she also feared what that truth might reveal. Melissa, said Richard softly, I want you to know that if we truly committed an injustice against your mother, I will do everything in my power to make it right. Thank you, Dr. Richard. That means a lot to me. Isabella approached Melissa and took her hand. "We will discover the truth together, I promise." The cook looked at the young woman with affection. In the middle of that difficult situation, she was finding an unexpected ally. "Isabella, why are you helping me? This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is," replied the young woman with conviction. "If an injustice was committed using my family's name, then it is my responsibility to help correct it." Richard smiled at his daughter, proud of her ethical stance. "I'll get the documents right now. Melissa, you can wait here with Isabella." After he left, Isabella sat down next to Melissa. "Tell me more about your mother," she asked. "What was she like?" Melissa smiled for the first time since she had found the photo. "She was the kindest person I have ever known. Always careful, always concerned about others. I remember her coming home tired from work, but she always had energy to play with me." "Did she tell you about her work?" "Very little. She only said she took care of sick people, but I could tell she really liked what she did. And in the last period, before she disappeared, how was she?" Melissa closed her eyes, trying to remember those last days. "She was very worried, but I was too young to understand about what. She would cry when she thought I wasn't looking. And she was afraid of something." "Afraid of what?" "I don't know. But I remember she locked the house door more carefully. She looked out the window a lot as if she was expecting someone to arrive." Isabella became thoughtful. "You know what I think? I think your mother found out who really stole the jewels, and that's why she was afraid." Isabella's observation made Melissa look at her with admiration. "You might be right. Maybe she saw something or overheard a conversation. And maybe whoever really stole them threatened her to keep quiet." The two fell silent, each lost in her own thoughts. Isabella's theory made a lot of sense, and would explain why Hope had disappeared so suddenly. Richard returned carrying an old folder of documents. He placed it on the coffee table and opened it. "Here is everything I found from that period," he said. "Documents from the time, medical reports about my mother and—" he hesitated. "And also the statements my aunt and uncle made at the time." Melissa approached the table, eager to finally see the papers that could clarify her mother's fate. "May I read everything?" "Of course. But there is one thing I need to tell you first." Richard's serious tone made Melissa stop handling the papers and look at him. "What is it?" "Some years after your mother's disappearance, I discovered something that made me question everything that had happened." "What did you discover?" Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "My Uncle Robert, shortly before passing away, came to me saying he had something important to tell me. He had a heavy conscience and wanted to confess." Melissa felt her heart race. "What did he confess?" "That he was the one who stole my mother's jewels." The silence that followed was absolute. Melissa felt as if the world had stopped turning. Isabella brought her hand to her mouth in shock. "What do you mean?" managed to ask Melissa, her voice weak. "He told me he had falsified some documents to gain access to the safe where my mother kept the most valuable jewels. Since he was family and always helped with the family business, no one suspected when he asked to see some papers. And he blamed my mother to divert suspicion from himself." "Exactly. He knew that Hope was the person with the most access to my mother's room, so it would be easy to make the suspicions fall on her." Melissa sat down heavily in the armchair, trying to process the information. "And when did you find this out?" "About 10 years ago." 10 years, she exclaimed, standing up again. "You knew for 10 years that my mother was innocent, and you never did anything to find her." Richard lowered his head, clearly ashamed. "Melissa, I tried to look for her. I hired private investigators, searched in various places." "And did you find anything?" "No. It was as if she had completely vanished." "Or as if she were dead," said Melissa bitterly. "Don't say that," begged Isabella, touching her arm. "Maybe she is alive somewhere, just hidden." "Hidden? Why? She did nothing wrong." Richard approached Melissa. "That is exactly why I need to make peace with this situation. Your mother suffered a terrible injustice, and I was responsible for it. You weren't the only one responsible," she said, calmer. "You were also deceived by your uncles." That doesn't excuse me. I should have investigated better before accepting the accusations against her. Isabella was flipping through the documents and suddenly stopped at a specific paper. Dad, look at this. This document has Grandma's signature, right? Richard came closer to see the paper. Yes, it's a power of attorney she signed for my Uncle Robert to handle some financial matters. Melissa, come look at this, called Isabella. Melissa approached and observed the document. Even with her limited education, she managed to notice something strange. The handwriting of this signature is very different from the others, she observed, comparing it with other documents. Richard took the paper and examined it more closely. He hadn't looked at those documents carefully in years. You're right, this signature really does look different. Could it have been forged? Asked Isabella. It's quite possible, said Richard, studying the document. My Uncle Robert was always very skilled with documents. He worked in accounting. Melissa sat down next to Isabella and began to examine other papers. Here's another strange signature, she pointed out. And look, this document is from 2 days before Mrs. Margaret passed away. Richard examined the paper that Melissa had found. This is a document authorizing the opening of my mother's jewelry safe, he explained, his voice growing increasingly tense. And you're right, the signature looks forged. So your uncle was planning the robbery even before your mother passed away? Asked Isabella, horrified. It seems so, admitted Richard, with disgust. He took advantage of my mother's illness to falsify documents and gain access to her valuables. Melissa continued examining the papers and found something that made her even more outraged. Here's a signed statement from your Uncle Robert saying my mother had access to all of Mrs. Margaret's belongings and that she was acting suspiciously in her final days. It's the statement he used to support the accusations against your mother, explained Richard. But look here, said Melissa, pointing to another part of the document. He says my mother was nervous and avoiding eye contact with the family. So what? Asked Isabella. If my mother was nervous, it wasn't because she had stolen anything. It was because she had found out what was happening and was scared. Melissa's theory made a lot of sense. Richard picked up another document from the folder. Here is my mother's final medical report. I'll read you what the doctor wrote. He put on his glasses and began to read. Mrs. Margaret shows significant improvement in her clinical condition, thanks to the exceptional care of her nurse, Hope Matthews. This professional's dedication and affection have been fundamental to the patient's well-being. See, said Melissa, emotional. The doctor himself praised my mother. There's more, continued Richard. Hope demonstrates excellent technical knowledge and an admirable professional ethic. She is one of the best nurses I have ever worked with. Isabella held Melissa's hand. Your mother was a wonderful person, Melissa. Anyone who reads this will know she wasn't capable of stealing from anyone. Melissa couldn't hold back her tears. After so many years hearing insinuations about her mother's character, she was finally finding proof of her honesty. Dr. Richard, do you have any idea where the stolen jewels are? My Uncle Robert, in his confession, said he had sold everything and used the money to pay off gambling debts he had. Gambling debts? Asked Isabella, surprised. Yes, Robert was addicted to gambling and owed a lot of money to dangerous people. My mother's jewels were the way he found to settle those debts. And where is that money now? It disappeared a long time ago. Robert died practically in poverty despite having stolen a fortune. Melissa continued looking through the documents and found something that surprised her. Here's a letter, she said, showing a yellowed envelope. What letter? Asked Richard, taking the envelope from her hands. It says for Richard, open only if necessary, read Isabella, looking over her father's shoulder. It's my Uncle Robert's handwriting, confirmed Richard. But I've never seen this letter before. Open it, asked Melissa eagerly. Richard carefully opened the envelope and took out a sheet of paper. His eyes widened as he read the contents. What does it say? Asked Melissa and Isabella at the same time. Richard looked up from the paper with an expression of total shock. He confesses to everything here, in detail. How he forged the documents, how he stole the jewels, how he planted the evidence to blame Hope. Is there anything else? Asked Melissa, noticing that Richard was still reading. "Yes," he said, his voice trembling. "There's some information about your mother." Melissa's heart almost stopped. What does he say about her? Richard hesitated, clearly debating internally whether he should tell or not. "Dr. Richard, please, I need to know." He sighed deeply and continued reading the letter. "Robert says that, on the day Hope disappeared, he looked for her to threaten her. He said that if she said anything about her suspicions, he would have her arrested for theft. My mother suspected him. According to this letter, she had found forged documents in your grandmother's room and was about to report him." "And what else?" insisted Melissa, sensing there was more information. Richard continued reading, but his expression grew increasingly grim. "Robert says that he didn't know where his mother had gone when she disappeared, but that he had heard rumors—" "What rumors?" "That she had gone to a city in the Pennsylvania countryside where she had an acquaintance." Melissa's heart raced. Finally, a concrete clue about her mother's whereabouts. "Which city? Does he say the name?" "Yes, he does. Clearwater." "Clearwater," repeated Melissa, trying to remember if she had ever heard that name before. "Do you know the city?" asked Isabella. "No. But wait." Melissa concentrated, trying to remember something. "My mother had a friend named Dorothy who moved to the countryside when I was very little. Maybe your mother looked for that friend," completed Richard. "It's possible. Dorothy was also a nurse. They worked together at a hospital before my mother came to work here." Isabella was excited by the discoveries. "Melissa, you have to go to Clearwater to look for your mother." "I don't have money to travel," she said, discouraged. "And even if I did, this was so long ago." "Melissa," interrupted Richard firmly, "I will pay for your trip to Clearwater, and I'm going with you." "Dr. Anderson, sir, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do. It's the only way for me to start fixing the mistake I made." Helen, who had quietly come down the stairs, appeared in the living room doorway. "Richard, what are you all doing down there? It's past 10 at night." "Helen, I need to tell you something," he said, standing up with the letter in his hand. "You can talk later. Now, everyone to your rooms. You can continue this conversation tomorrow." "No, Helen, you need to hear this now." The seriousness in Richard's voice made Helen approach, though visibly reluctant. "What is it?" "We found a written confession from my Uncle Robert. He admits to stealing my mother's jewels and blaming Hope unfairly." Helen was silent for a long moment, processing the information. "A confession?" she asked finally. "Yes. It's all here, in writing." Melissa was right. Her mother was innocent. Helen slowly sat down in an armchair as if her legs could no longer support her. "My God," she whispered. "What have we done?" "We made a terrible mistake," admitted Richard. "But now we have a chance to correct it." "How?" asked Helen, her voice weak. "If Hope is alive, how do we explain 25 years of injustice?" "We will ask for forgiveness," said Melissa, surprising everyone with her simplicity. "And we will try to repair the damage that was caused." Helen looked at the cook with admiration. "Melissa, after everything you went through because of us, would you still be able to forgive us?" "Mrs. Helen, holding a grudge won't bring my mother back. What matters now is finding her and clearing up this whole story." Richard approached Melissa. "We'll go to Clearwater tomorrow. I'll cancel all my appointments." "I'm going too," announced Isabella. "No, daughter. You have school." "Dad, this is more important than any class. Please let me go too." Helen, who had remained silent until then, surprised everyone. "Richard, if you are traveling to resolve this matter, I am coming too." "Helen, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. If our family committed this injustice, then our whole family must take part in making it right." Melissa looked at the three people in front of her and felt a mixture of gratitude and hope. After so many years of doubt and suffering, she finally had allies in the search for the truth. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked. "Thank you for believing in me and my mother." "We are the ones who should thank you," said Richard, "for giving us the opportunity to do what is right." Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was different. Melissa woke up early, as always, but instead of going straight to the kitchen, she went to the living room where she had left the documents the night before. She wanted to reread everything more calmly, to absorb every detail of Robert's confession. Richard was already there, sitting in the armchair with a cup of coffee in his hand, studying some papers. "Good morning, Melissa. Did you sleep well?" "To be honest, I barely closed my eyes," she admitted. "I keep thinking that maybe today I'll finally find my mother. Or maybe we'll find information that leads us to her," he said, trying not to get their hopes up too high. "Melissa, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your mother might no longer be in Clearwater. 25 years have passed." "I know. But at least I'll know I tried." Helen came down the stairs, already dressed for the trip. She had spent the night rethinking the whole situation and had concluded that she really needed to take part in the search for the truth. "Good morning," she said with a timid smile. "Richard, did you make the hotel reservations?" "It's all taken care of. And you, Melissa, do you need anything for the trip?" "No, thank you. I just want to bring the photo I found yesterday." Isabella came running down the stairs, carrying a backpack. "I'm ready." "Isabella, are you sure you want to go?" asked Helen. "We don't know what we'll find there." "I'm sure, Mom. I want to help Melissa find the truth about her family." Melissa looked at the young woman affectionately. Amid all that difficult situation, Isabella had become a true friend. During the car trip to Clearwater, which took about 7 hours, the group talked about the possibilities they might encounter. Richard had hired a local private investigator to help them with the search, and they already had a few addresses to check. "Melissa," said Helen from the back seat, "I want to apologize for my attitude yesterday. I was afraid of the consequences of this whole situation." "What consequences, Mrs. Helen?" "Well, if we discovered there really was an injustice, it could tarnish our family's reputation." "Mom," exclaimed Isabella, outraged, "reputation is less important than justice." "Isabella is right," said Richard. "The truth should always be more important than appearances." "I know that now," admitted Helen. "Spending the whole night thinking about the situation made me realize we've been wrong for a long time." Melissa turned to look at Helen. "Mrs. Helen, what matters is that you're here now, willing to correct the mistake. That means a lot to me." When they arrived in Clearwater, it was already mid-afternoon. The city was bigger than Melissa had imagined, which made the search even more challenging. The private investigator, a man named Jack, met them at the hotel where they were staying. "I have some preliminary information," he said, opening a folder. "I managed to locate records of a nurse named Hope Matthews who worked at the city hospital here between 2000 and 2010. Melissa's heart raced. "She worked here for 10 years. "Yes, and according to the records, she was a very respected professional. But in 2010, she requested a transfer to another hospital." "Where?" "A hospital in a smaller town called Pineville. It's about an hour from here." Richard stood up immediately. "Let's go to Pineville right now." "Dad, it's getting late," observed Isabella. "Maybe it's better to go tomorrow morning." "Isabella is right," said Jack. "Besides, I got the phone number of a retired nurse who worked with Hope at the city hospital here. Her name is Dorothy." Melissa almost screamed with emotion. "Dorothy? She was my mother's friend. I knew she knew someone here." "I can call her now if you'd like," offered Jack. "Please call," asked Melissa, barely able to contain her anxiety. Jack dialed the number, and after a few rings, someone answered. "Hello, Mrs. Dorothy? This is Jack, the private investigator." "Yes, exactly. The young lady is here with me now." "What?" "She is." "Can I put her on the phone?" Melissa took the phone with trembling hands. "Hello?" "Melissa? My child, is it really you?" The voice on the other end of the line was that of an elderly lady, but filled with emotion. "Mrs. Dorothy, is it really you, my mother's friend?" "Yes, my dear. I've been waiting for this call for so many years. Do you know where my mother is?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Melissa felt her heart skip a beat. Melissa, your mother. Your mother is here with me. The phone almost slipped from Melissa's hand. Helen, Richard, and Isabella moved closer, sensing something important was happening. Is she alive? She managed to ask. Yes, my child. She is alive, but very sick. Tears began to stream down Melissa's face. Sick? How? She had a stroke 2 years ago and was left with after effects. She can't speak properly and has difficulty moving, but she is conscious and always talks about you. Can I go see her now? Of course you can, my dear. Come as quickly as possible. Your mother really needs to see you. Jack took the phone back and wrote down Dorothy's address. It was in a more remote neighborhood of the city, but it wouldn't be hard to find. Let's go now, said Melissa, already heading for the door. Melissa, wait, called Richard. Are you sure you want us to come along? Maybe it's better if you go alone first. She stopped and thought for a moment. No, you're coming with me. After all, you're also part of this story. Dorothy's house was simple, but well kept. A lady of about 70 years old greeted them at the door, with tears in her eyes. Melissa, my child, how you've grown, she said, hugging the young woman affectionately. Mrs. Dorothy, where is my mother? She's in the back room. But before you see her, I need to tell you a few things. They sat down in the small living room and Dorothy began to tell the story of the last 25 years. Your mother arrived here in 1999, terrified, saying she had been falsely accused of theft. She cried a lot in the first few months, always talking about you, wondering if she had done the right thing by leaving you with your aunt. Why didn't she come back to get me? Asked Melissa, her voice choked. Because she was afraid, my child. Afraid of being arrested. Afraid that you would be harmed because of it. She preferred to suffer far away than to risk something bad happening to you. Richard, who had remained silent, spoke up. Mrs. Dorothy, I am Richard, son of Mrs. Margaret, the Lady Hope used to care for. Dorothy looked at him with an expression of surprise and then of contained anger. You are the boss's son. What are you doing here? I came to ask for forgiveness, he said simply, and to clarify that Hope was innocent. What do you mean? Richard explained the whole situation. The discovery of Robert's confession, the proof that the signatures were fake, everything. Dorothy listened to him in silence, her eyes filled with tears. Hope always said she was innocent, she said when he finished. Always. Even in the most difficult moments when she was sick and had no money, she never changed her story. How did she live all these years? Asked Helen, genuinely concerned. With great sacrifice. She worked in various places, always using a fake name, always afraid of being discovered. She saved money for years so she could study and specialize, because she wanted to prove to herself that she was a person of value. And did she manage it? Asked Isabella. She did. She took an advanced nursing course, worked in important hospitals, helped many people. But she never managed to overcome the pain of having lost you, Melissa. Can I see her now? Asked Melissa impatiently. Yes, you can, but she is very fragile. The stroke left significant after effects. She understands everything, but has difficulty speaking. Dorothy led her to a small room at the back of the house. In a simple bed lay a woman with completely white hair, with the serene expression of someone who was sleeping. Hope, called Dorothy softly. Hope, wake up. There's a surprise for you. The woman opened her eyes slowly. When she saw Melissa standing in the doorway, her expression changed completely. Me? Melissa? She managed to say, with difficulty. Melissa approached the bed and held her mother's hand. After 25 years, she was finally touching her mother again. It's me, Mother, I'm your daughter. Hope tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out right. Tears streamed down her face as she caressed her daughter's face. Mother, I found out the truth about what happened. Mr. Richard is here with me. He knows that you are innocent. Hope looked over Melissa's shoulder and saw Richard standing in the doorway of the room. Her expression changed, showing a mixture of surprise and fear. Richard approached the bed, visibly emotional. Mrs. Hope, I came here to ask for your forgiveness. I found out that you were innocent, and I deeply regret all the suffering we caused you and your daughter. Hope tried to speak, but could only make some unintelligible sounds. "She wants to know how you found out the truth," translated Dorothy, who knew her friend's communication difficulties well. Richard explained the whole situation again, showing the documents and Robert's confession. Hope listened to everything carefully, and her tears intensified as she understood that her innocence had finally been proven. "Mother," said Melissa, holding her hand firmly, "Dr. Richard wants to repair the injustice that was committed. He wants to take care of you and give you everything you need." Hope shook her head negatively, making gestures that indicated refusal. "She doesn't want to accept anything," interpreted Dorothy. "She is very proud." "Mrs. Hope," said Helen, who had until then remained silent in the doorway, "please let us help. It's the only way we have to begin to repair the wrong we did." Hope looked at Helen with curiosity, as if trying to remember where she knew her from. "I'm Helen, Richard's wife," she introduced herself. "I know we haven't met personally, but I was also responsible for perpetuating the injustice against you." Isabella approached the bed. "Mrs. Hope, I'm Isabella, their daughter. I was born after all this happened, but I want to help Melissa and you too." Hope smiled upon seeing the young woman. There was something about Isabella that touched her deeply. "Mother," said Melissa, "they are good people, and I have worked for them for 3 years. They treat me well." Hope gestured for Melissa to come closer. With great effort she managed to whisper a few words. Are you okay?" "I'm okay, Mother, and now that I've found you, I'll be even better." "Mrs. Hope," said Richard, "at least let me pay for better medical treatment for you. There are therapies that can help recover some speech and mobility." Dorothy approached her friend. "Hope, accept their help. You deserve to have the best treatment possible." After a long moment of reflection, Hope nodded her head positively. "Thank you," said Richard. "Tomorrow I will arrange for you to be examined by the best doctors in the region." "Actually," Helen interrupted, "I think it would be better to take Mrs. Hope to New York. There she will have access to the best treatments available." Melissa looked at her mother, waiting for her reaction. "Mother, what do you think? Do you want to go to New York with me?" Hope squeezed her daughter's hand in response. It was the first time in 25 years that she had hope for a better future. "And Mrs. Dorothy is coming with us too," said Isabella, surprising everyone. "They've been friends for so long, they can't be separated now." Dorothy smiled, touched by the young woman's generosity. "Young lady, you have a very good heart." "I learned from my parents," replied Isabella, looking at Richard and Helen with pride. In the following days, Richard organized the entire process of transferring Hope to a top hospital in New York. Helen took care of the details of Dorothy's accommodation, and Isabella took charge of keeping the two ladies company during the medical procedures. Melissa was radiant. After so many years of doubt and suffering, she had not only found her mother alive, but also discovered that she was innocent of all the accusations. During one of the medical consultations, the neurologist gave hope that Hope could recover a good part of her speech ability with intensive physical therapy. "Mrs. Hope has an impressive willpower," said the doctor. "With the proper treatment, I believe she can have a significant improvement." "Doctor, will she be able to live independently again?" asked Melissa. "It's difficult to predict completely, but with advances in stroke treatment, many patients manage to regain considerable autonomy." Richard, who was present at the consultation, addressed the doctor. "Doctor, money is not a problem. I want Mrs. Hope to have access to the best possible treatment." "Dr. Richard," said Melissa, "how can I repay all this?" "Melissa, you don't need to repay anything. We are the ones who owe reparation to you and your mother." During the weeks of treatment, something beautiful happened. Richard's family and Hope with Dorothy became very close. Isabella especially developed a special affection for the two ladies, spending entire afternoons talking with them. "Melissa," Helen said one day, "I have a proposal to make." "What proposal, Mrs. Helen?" "How about if your mother and Mrs. Dorothy came to live with us? We have plenty of rooms in the house, and this way you could take care of your mother and continue working with us." Melissa was surprised by the offer. "Mrs. Helen, that is very generous, but nothing. Your mother was part of our family once, and now we want her to be part of it again." And Mrs. Dorothy too, added Isabella. She can teach me how to make the traditional Pennsylvania sweets she used to make for my grandmother Hope. Hope, who was already able to speak a few words more clearly, managed to express her gratitude. Thank you very much, she said, with tears in her eyes. You don't need to thank us, Mrs. Hope, said Richard. It's the least we can do. In the weeks that followed, the Anderson family house was transformed. With Hope and Dorothy living there, the atmosphere became more welcoming, more familiar. The two ladies brought stories, traditions, and much affection for everyone. Helen discovered that she loved talking with Dorothy about old recipes and about life in the countryside. Richard found in Hope a source of wisdom and humility that impressed him, and Isabella gained two surrogate grandmothers who filled her with affection and advice. Melissa was happier than ever. Being able to take care of her mother every day, see her gradual improvement, and on top of that, have the support of the Anderson family, was more than she could have dreamed of. One day, about 2 months after the discovery, Richard called Melissa for a private conversation. Melissa, I have something important to tell you. What is it, Dr. Richard? Helen and I have talked, and we decided we want to do something more to redress the injustice committed against your mother. More, but you've already done so much. We want to create a compensation fund for your family, an amount that compensates, even if minimally, for all the years of suffering you've been through. Dr. Richard, that's not necessary. Yes, it is necessary, Melissa, for our own conscience and for justice to truly be served. What kind of fund? A sufficient amount to ensure that you and your mother have financial security for the rest of your lives. And we also want to put your mother's name on a charitable project we are creating. What project? A support center for people who have been victims of similar injustices, people who were falsely accused and need help rebuilding their lives. Melissa was moved by the proposal. My mother would be very proud to know her name is helping other people. That's exactly what we want, for your suffering to help prevent others from going through the same situation. That night, during the family dinner, which now included Hope, Dorothy, Helen, Richard, Isabella, and Melissa, Richard made an official announcement. I would like to make a toast, he said, raising his glass. To Hope Matthews, a woman of admirable character who suffered a terrible injustice, but never lost her dignity and kindness. And to Melissa, added Helen, who never gave up searching for the truth about her mother and gave us the opportunity to correct our mistakes. And to Dorothy, said Isabella, who took care of my new grandmother Hope with so much affection all these years. And to you, said Melissa, looking at the Anderson family, who had the courage to admit the mistake and the generosity to make amends. Hope, who was managing to speak a little better each day, also wanted to say something. I forgive everything. Thank you. For the new family. Everyone was moved by Hope's words. After so much suffering, she still had the capacity for forgiveness and gratitude. Richard stood up and addressed Hope. Mrs. Hope, you are a life lesson for all of us. Your forgiveness frees us from the weight of guilt, but it does not absolve us of the responsibility to continue doing what is right. Helen also spoke. Hope, thank you for teaching me that dignity is not in what we possess, but in who we are inside. Isabella, always emotional, couldn't hold back her tears. Grandma Hope, Grandma Dorothy, thank you for showing me that family isn't just those born of the same blood, but those we choose to love and care for. And thank you, Melissa, she continued, for teaching me that perseverance and faith can overcome any injustice. Melissa looked around the table and saw a family she had never imagined having. Her mother was alive, being cared for, and surrounded by people who respected and cared for her. Justice had been served, and more importantly, love had triumphed over pain. I think my mother couldn't be happier, she said, looking at Hope, who was smiling serenely. And I couldn't be prouder of the woman my daughter has become, Hope managed to say with effort but with much love in her voice. It was at that moment that everyone realized that this story, which had begun with so much suffering, was finally finding its redemption. The old photo that Melissa had found by chance in the drawer wasn't just a portrait of the past, but had become a bridge to a future of love, forgiveness, and family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 months later, the Hope Matthews Support Center was inaugurated in an emotional ceremony. Many people from the community attended, including former employees of the Anderson family who had learned the story through Mrs. Carmen, the housekeeper. Mrs. Carmen, who had worked in the Anderson house at the time of Hope's disappearance, made a point of approaching her during the ceremony. "Mrs. Hope, I always knew you were innocent," she said with tears in her eyes. "I always knew. You were the most honest person I ever met." "Why didn't you say anything back then?" asked Melissa. "Because I was new to the job and I was afraid of losing it," admitted Carmen, ashamed. "But I never forgave myself for not having the courage to defend you." Hope, who was already speaking much better thanks to intensive treatment, held Carmen's hand. "Don't blame yourself. There was nothing you could have done." "But now I can," said Carmen, determined. "I want to volunteer at the center, helping other people who have gone through similar situations." The inauguration ceremony was marked by several emotional speeches. The city mayor was present and praised the Anderson family's initiative. "This center represents the best of human nature," he said, "the ability to recognize mistakes, ask for forgiveness, and turn suffering into help for others." Richard gave a speech that touched everyone present. "This center exists because a courageous woman named Melissa never gave up searching for the truth about her mother, and because an admirable woman named Hope Matthews taught us that forgiveness is more powerful than revenge." When it was Hope's turn to speak, she stood up with some difficulty but with determination. Her speech was still a bit slow, but her words were clear and full of emotion. 25 years ago, I lost everything. I lost my daughter, my job, my dignity. I thought I would never be happy again." She paused to control her emotions. "But today I realized that maybe all of this happened for a reason, so that I could learn about forgiveness, about family, about second chances." She looked at Melissa, who was by her side. "My daughter taught me that a mother's love is never lost, even with distance and time. She never gave up on me." Then she looked at the Anderson family. "And you taught me that people can change, they can grow, they can correct their mistakes. This center will help many people, and that makes me very happy." The audience applauded warmly. There were very few dry eyes in the house. Isabella, who had prepared to speak on behalf of the family, approached the microphone. "I'm 17 years old, and before this story happened I thought I knew everything about justice and family. But Melissa and Grandma Hope taught me that true justice isn't about punishing those who made a mistake, but giving them a chance to make it right." She looked at her parents. "And my parents taught me that admitting a mistake isn't a sign of weakness, but of strength. That asking for forgiveness doesn't diminish a person, but makes them greater." She spoke directly to Melissa. "Melissa, thank you for not holding a grudge against us. Thank you for giving us the chance to do the right thing." After the official ceremony, there was a gathering in the center's garden. It was then that something nobody expected happened. An elderly man approached Hope with a nervous expression. "Mrs. Hope?" he called out hesitantly. Hope turned and recognized him immediately. It was Anthony, the former gardener for the Anderson family. "Anthony, how are you?" "Mrs. Hope, I need to ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness for what?" The man began to cry. "Because I saw Mr. Robert leaving the boss's room with a bag in his hand on the night you disappeared. I knew something was wrong. But when you all accused the lady, I was afraid to speak up and lose my job." Melissa approached, interested in the confession. "You saw Uncle Robert stealing the jewels?" "Yes, I did, miss. I saw him sneaking out of the house in the early hours with a heavy bag. The next day, when we found out the jewels were missing and the blame was falling on your mother, I wanted to speak. But my wife was sick. She needed the money from my job." "Anthony," Hope interrupted softly, "I understand you had a family to take care of. But you had one too," he said, desperate, "and I let you be accused unfairly." Richard, who was listening to the conversation, approached. "Anthony, can you tell us exactly what you saw that night?" The gardener recounted everything in detail, how he saw Robert sneaking out of the house around 3 in the morning, how he was carrying a bag that seemed heavy, how the next day Robert showed up at the house saying that Hope had run away and had certainly taken the jewels. He arrived early that morning before everyone woke up and started spreading the word that Mrs. Hope had fled during the night, Anthony recounted. He was the one who planted the idea that she had stolen the jewels. Helen, who was listening, was shocked. "You mean Robert not only stole the jewels but also orchestrated the entire accusation against Hope?" "That's exactly it," Anthony confirmed. "He calculated everything. He knew that if he said Mrs. Hope had run away, no one would question it, and since she had actually disappeared out of fear of the accusations, it seemed he was right." Melissa felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger at knowing how her mother had been manipulated, but relief at having another confirmation of her innocence. "Anthony," she said, "thank you for coming here to tell the truth. I know it wasn't easy carrying this weight on your conscience for so many years. Miss, when I heard that you had found Mrs. Hope and that the truth had been discovered, I knew I had to come here and tell what I really saw. I can't live with this secret anymore." Hope approached Anthony and, surprising everyone, hugged him. "Anthony, I forgive you. You were in a difficult situation and you did what you thought was best for your family. You are a saint, Mrs. Hope," he said, crying. "I'm not a saint. I'm just a person who learned that holding a grudge doesn't make anyone's life better." Anthony's confession was another piece that fit into the puzzle of the truth. Richard realized he had been even more manipulated by his uncle than he had imagined. Robert not only stole the jewels, but also orchestrated the entire scheme to incriminate Hope, he said to Helen. "He was much more calculating than I thought." "The important thing is that now we know the whole truth," Helen replied, "and that we were able to achieve justice, even if belatedly." In the following months, the Hope Matthews Support Center became a landmark in the city. Many people who had suffered injustices sought help there, and several families were reconciled thanks to the work done. Melissa officially took over the coordination of the center, combining this role with her work at the Anderson family home. Hope, even with her physical limitations, actively participated in the activities, offering emotional support to those who came to the center. Dorothy became a sort of matriarch of the place, cooking for the visitors and offering her maternal affection to those in need. Isabella, even with her studies, dedicated several hours a week to the center, especially helping young people who were going through difficult situations. Helen surprised everyone by proving to be an excellent administrator of the center, handling all the financial and bureaucratic aspects with efficiency and dedication. And Richard became the main funder and promoter of the project, using his influence as a businessman to secure donations and support from other companies. 1 year after the discovery of the truth, the family was gathered for Sunday dinner, as had become the tradition. The large table in the dining room was always full. Hope, Dorothy, Melissa, Richard, Helen, Isabella, and often some special guests. On that particular Sunday, Melissa had something important to announce. "Everyone, I have some news to share," she said with a mysterious smile. "What news?" asked Isabella, curious. "I'm getting married." The table erupted in exclamations of joy and surprise. "With whom?" asked Helen excitedly. "With Jack, the investigator who helped us find my mother." "How wonderful," said Richard. "When did this happen?" "Gradually," explained Melissa, blushing. "We kept seeing each other after the investigation. He started volunteering at the center and, well, one day we realized we were in love." Hope, who was sitting next to her daughter, held her hand affectionately. "He is a good man. I approve," she said with a smile. "And has he officially asked for your hand?" asked Dorothy, always mindful of traditions. "Yes, he has, Mrs. Dorothy. Last week he spoke with my mother and me." "And where will the wedding be?" Helen wanted to know. "In the chapel at the center, if you all agree. We want it to be there because it was through the search for the truth that we met." "What a beautiful idea," exclaimed Isabella. "And can I be the maid of honor?" "Of course you can. Actually, I was thinking of asking Mrs. Helen to be my matron of honor, and for Dr. Richard to walk me down the aisle." Helen was moved by the request. "Melissa, it would be a tremendous honor to be your matron of honor." "And for me it would also be an honor to walk you down the aisle," said Richard with tears in his eyes. "It would be like walking my own daughter." Hope, even with her speech limitations, wanted to express her feelings. "Melissa, my daughter, you deserve all the happiness in the world. Jack is a good man. I am very happy." "And I am happy because my daughter is getting married surrounded by family," said Melissa, looking at everyone at the table. "A family that we chose to love each other." The wedding preparations involved the whole family. Helen took charge of the organization, Isabella handled the decorations, Richard hired the best suppliers, Dorothy prepared the traditional sweets, and Hope, even with her limitations, helped by choosing the music and giving advice about the dress. The wedding day was emotional. The chapel at the center was packed with friends, center staff, former co-workers, and people who had been helped by the project. Melissa was beautiful in her simple yet elegant dress, chosen with Helen's help and approved by Hope. Jack at the altar waited for her with a radiant smile. When Richard gave Melissa away to Jack, he whispered in her ear, "Your mother is proud of you, and I am too." During the ceremony, the priest reflected on how this wedding symbolized much more than the union of two people. Melissa and Jack met on a quest for truth and justice, and today, their union represents the victory of love over injustice, of family over loneliness, of hope over despair. Hope, sitting in the front row next to Dorothy, cried with emotion. Seeing her daughter so happy, surrounded by people who loved her, was more than she had ever dreamed of. When it was time for the vows, Melissa surprised everyone with her words. "Jack, you came into my life when I most needed someone to believe in me, and in my search. You helped me find not only my mother, but also a family I didn't know I needed." She looked at the Anderson family. "Richard, Helen, and Isabella taught me that family isn't just about who you're born with, but who chooses to stay together. And my mother and Mrs. Dorothy showed me that true love overcomes any distance or difficulty." Jack had also prepared special vows. "Melissa, when I agreed to investigate your mother's case, I thought it would be just another job. But I ended up finding not only the truth you were looking for, but also the love of my life." The party after the ceremony was joyful and relaxed. Everyone danced, sang, and celebrated not only the wedding of Melissa and Jack, but also the union of a family that had formed through adversity. During the couple's dance, Hope managed to get up from the wheelchair she still needed to use sometimes and danced a few songs, supported by Melissa and Jack. "Mom, you're able to dance," said Melissa, moved. It's the happiness that's giving me strength," replied Hope with a radiant smile. Later, during the speeches, Helen stood up to speak. "2 years ago, if someone had told me that today we would be here, celebrating the wedding of our Melissa, as if she were our own daughter, I wouldn't have believed it. But life teaches us that the true family is the one we build with love, forgiveness, and mutual dedication." Richard also wanted to speak. "Melissa, you came into our home as an employee, but you became our daughter. Your perseverance, your generosity, and your ability to forgive have made us better people. Thank you for giving us the chance to be part of this wonderful family." Isabella, who was now 18 and had been deeply marked by the whole experience, gave a speech that moved everyone. "Melissa, when I was 17, I thought I knew everything about life. But you taught me that true wisdom comes from experience, from overcoming pain, and from the ability to love even after suffering injustice." She looked at Hope. "Grandma Hope, thank you for showing me that dignity isn't in what we possess, but in who we are, and that forgiveness is a gift we give first to ourselves." When it was Dorothy's turn to speak, the veteran nurse stood up with difficulty, but with determination. "I took care of Hope for 25 years. I saw her cry for her lost daughter. I saw her fight against illness. I saw her always maintain the hope of one day reuniting with Melissa. Today, seeing you all here, united as a family, I know all the suffering was worth it." Finally, it was Hope's turn to speak. With Melissa's help, she stood up and addressed the guests. Her speech was much better, a result of months of intensive treatment. My dear ones, 25 years ago I thought my life was over. I lost my daughter. I lost my job. I lost my dignity. But today I realize that all of that happened so I could learn life's most important lessons. She paused, looking at each special person in her life. I learned that a mother never loses love for her daughter, even with distance. I learned that people can make mistakes, but they can also correct them. I learned that family is much more than blood ties. And I learned that forgiveness frees both the one who forgives and the one who is forgiven. She addressed Melissa and Jack specifically. Melissa, my dear daughter, you never gave up on me. When everyone thought I was a thief, you kept believing in my innocence. Jack, thank you for helping my daughter find me and for loving her the way she deserves to be loved. Then she looked at the Anderson family. Richard, Helen, and Isabella, you had the humility to recognize a mistake and the generosity to correct it. More than that, you gave us a family. I will never forget your kindness. And finally, she addressed everyone present. To all of you who are here today, remember, it's never too late to do the right thing. It's never too late to ask for forgiveness. It's never too late to start over. And never, ever give up fighting for truth and justice. The hall erupted in applause. There wasn't a single person who wasn't moved by Hope's words. After the party, when the family was gathered in the living room of the Anderson house, reminiscing about the special moments of the day, Melissa pulled the old photo from her pocket. "Look at this," she said, showing the yellowed photograph. "If I hadn't found this photo by chance in that drawer, none of this would have happened." "It wasn't by chance," said Isabella thoughtfully. "It was destiny. The photo was waiting for the right time to be found." "Maybe you're right," agreed Richard. "Maybe everything happened at the right time, in the right way." "What are we going to do with the photo now?" asked Helen. "I'm going to put it in a special frame and keep it at the center," said Melissa, "to remind everyone who visits there that the truth always finds a way to come out. And that a simple photograph can change the lives of many people," added Jack. Hope, who was tired but happy, looked at the photo one last time before Melissa put it away. "In this photo, I was taking care of someone I loved. Today, I'm being taken care of by people I love. Life goes in circles, but love always finds a way to win." 3 years had passed since Melissa's wedding. The Hope Matthews Support Center had become a national reference for supporting victims of injustice. Hundreds of families had been reconciled, dozens of false accusation cases had been clarified, and many people had found help to rebuild their lives. Melissa and Jack had become parents to twins, Hope, named after her grandmother, and Richard, named after his godfather. The children grew up surrounded by love and attention from the entire extended family. Hope had regained much of her mobility and speech thanks to ongoing treatment. She had become a kind of spiritual counselor at the center, offering words of comfort and hope to those who arrived there in despair. Dorothy, at 75 years old, remained active and was considered the official matriarch of the family. Her Pennsylvania recipes had become famous in the neighborhood, and she always had an extra dish prepared for any visitor. Helen had discovered a vocation for social work and dedicated herself fully to the center. She organized lectures, charity events, and had developed a special skill for securing donations from companies. Richard continued to be the main funder of the project, but more than that, he had become an active advocate for the rights of people who had suffered injustice. He often gave lectures at universities and companies about the importance of social responsibility. Isabella, now 21 years old, was studying law with a specialization in human rights. Her plan was to graduate and work exclusively with cases of people who had suffered injustice, following the example of the family that had inspired her. On a Sunday afternoon, as usual, the whole family was gathered for lunch. The children were playing in the garden, while the adults talked in the living room. "Did you know the center is going to be 5 years old next month?" commented Helen. "Has it really been 5 years already?" said Melissa, impressed. "It seems like just yesterday that everything began." "And look at all the good things that have happened since then," observed Jack. "How many families have been reunited? How many truths have been discovered?" "Do you know what the most beautiful part of all this is?" asked Hope, who was playing with her grandchildren on her lap. "It's that our pain has turned into healing for other people." "It's true," agreed Dorothy. "Who would have thought that such great suffering could generate so much good?" Richard looked at the framed portrait of the whole family that was on the living room wall. It was a recent photo taken last Christmas, where everyone appeared smiling and hugging. "Melissa," he said, "do you remember when you asked me if I really believed your mother was a thief?" "I remember. Why?" "Because at that moment, I knew that I didn't believe it. And that's when I realized I had spent years living with a guilt that I didn't want to admit." "And what do you feel today about all that?" she asked. "I feel gratitude. Gratitude that you gave us the chance to correct our mistake and that you allowed us to be part of this wonderful family." Helen approached Melissa and held her hand. "Melissa, thank you for not holding a grudge against us. Your generosity saved us from the guilt we carried." "And thank you for having the humility to recognize the mistake," replied Melissa. "That's very rare in today's world." Isabella, who was helping serve lunch, stopped to observe the scene. "Do you know what I admire most about this whole story?" "What?" everyone asked, curious. "The ability you all had to turn a terrible situation into something beautiful. To make suffering turn into hope for other people." Hope looked at her step-granddaughter affectionately. "Isabella, you've grown so much these years. You've become a wise and generous woman." "I learned from the best examples," replied the young woman, hugging Hope. After lunch, while the children slept, the adults gathered on the porch to talk. It was a custom they had developed in recent years, using these Sunday afternoons to plan future projects and reflect on life. "Everyone," said Melissa, "I've been thinking about writing a book telling our story." "What an interesting idea," said Jack. "It could help many people who are going through similar situations." "Exactly. I plan to tell everything. My mother's disappearance, the years of suffering, the discovery of the truth, the forgiveness, the reconciliation, and the creation of the center too," added Helen, "to show that it's possible to turn pain into purpose." "Do you want me to help with the investigation part?" offered Jack. "Of course. And you, the Anderson family. Would you like to participate by telling your side of the story?" "It would be an honor," said Richard. "Maybe our story can inspire other people to recognize their mistakes and try to correct them." Hope, who was listening to the conversation attentively, spoke up. "Melissa, if you are going to write this book, I want you to include one important thing." "What, Mother?" "That forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let what happened keep hurting you." "What a beautiful phrase, Mother. I will definitely include that in the book." Dorothy, who was knitting clothes for the twins, looked up from her work. "And don't forget to talk about the importance of true friendship. If I hadn't taken Hope in when she arrived here, maybe this story would have had a different ending." "It's true, Mrs. Dorothy," agreed Melissa. "You were an angel in my mother's life." "An angel nothing," laughed Dorothy. Laughed. "I just did what any decent person would do for a friend in need." "But that's not as common as it should be," observed Isabella. "Many people prefer to distance themselves when someone is in trouble." "That's why our story is so important," said Helen. "To show that it is possible, yes, to do good and make a difference in the lives of others." As the afternoon progressed, the conversation became more reflective. Each person shared how that experience had changed their perspective on life. "You know what I learned from all this?" said Richard. "That true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in the people we love and who love us." "And I learned that we should never judge someone without knowing the whole story," added Helen. "I learned that persistence always pays off," said Melissa. "If I had given up searching for the truth about my mother, none of this would have happened." "And I learned that family is built every day with gestures of love and care," completed Jack. Isabella reflected for a moment before speaking. "I learned that young people can and should question when something seems unfair. If I hadn't insisted on discovering the truth about Grandma Hope, perhaps you wouldn't have found her." "That's true," said Richard, proud of his daughter. "Your courage to question our certainties was fundamental for us to discover the truth." Hope, who had remained quiet, listening to everyone's reflections, finally spoke. I learned that God never abandons us, even when we think we are completely alone. In the most difficult moments of my life, someone always appeared to help me. Dorothy, the doctors who treated me, and in the end, you, my new family. And I learned that age is just a number, said Dorothy, eliciting laughter from everyone. At 75 years old, I can still start a new life, make new friends, have a new family. The children woke up from their naps and came running to the porch. Little Richard went straight to his namesake, while little Hope went into her grandmother's lap. "Come up, parents," said the little girl with her still childish speech. "Tell story." "What story do you want to hear, my little granddaughter?" "The story of the photo," everyone laughed. The children loved hearing the story of how an old photo had brought the whole family together. "Once upon a time," began Hope in a caring voice, "a forgotten photo in a drawer." While Hope told the story to her grandchildren, the adults watched tenderly. That simple scene, a grandmother telling stories to her grandchildren surrounded by family, represented everything they had achieved together. "Melissa," whispered Helen, "do you regret anything about all that happened?" "Only one thing," she replied thoughtfully. "What?" "Not having found that photo sooner." Everyone laughed softly, so as not to interrupt the story Hope was telling. When night fell, as usual, the whole family gathered for dinner. The large table comfortably seated everyone: Hope, Dorothy, Melissa, Jack, the twins in their high chairs, Richard, Helen, and Isabella. Before they began to eat, Richard asked for permission to share a thought. "Family," he said, looking at everyone around the table, "today marks exactly 5 years since that afternoon when Melissa found the photo of her mother in the kitchen drawer." "5 years!" exclaimed Melissa. "How time flies when we're happy." "And look how our family has grown," observed Helen, smiling at the twins who were playing with their food. "From 4 people who barely knew each other, we've become 9 people who love each other deeply." 10, corrected Dorothy. "You're forgetting to count me." "We would never forget you, Mrs. Dorothy," said Isabella, kissing the elderly woman's cheek. "You are the heart of this house." "I want to make a toast," announced Jack, raising his glass, "to the family that is built every day, to the love that overcomes any difficulty, and to the truth that always finds a way to come to light." "Cheers," they all said in unison, raising their glasses. Hope, holding her glass with both hands due to the after-effects of the stroke, insisted on speaking. "To the second chance life gave me, to the daughter who never gave up on me, to the family who took me in, and to the forgiveness that sets you free and heals." "Cheers," they all repeated, moved. After dinner, while Helen and Dorothy took care of the dishes, a task they insisted on doing together, using the time to talk, and Melissa and Jack put the twins to bed, Richard, Isabella, and Hope stayed in the living room talking. "Grandma Hope," said Isabella, using the affectionate nickname she had created, "do you feel fulfilled with everything we've accomplished?" "More than fulfilled, my dear. I feel my life had a purpose. All the suffering I went through served some good purpose. The center has already helped over 1,000 families," said Richard proudly. "Your story has inspired many people not to give up the search for justice. And it will inspire many more when Melissa writes the book," added Isabella. Hope smiled, remembering their afternoon conversation. "Do you know what I most want people to learn from our story?" "What?" they both asked. "That it's never too late to start over, that it's never too late to do the right thing, and that true love always finds a way to win." Richard stood up and kissed Hope's forehead. "Thank you for teaching us these lessons, Mrs. Hope. Thank you for forgiving us and allowing us to be part of your family." "Thank you," she replied, "for giving me back not only my daughter, but also my dignity and the joy of living." When everyone gathered again in the living room, Melissa brought an envelope that had arrived in the mail that day. "Everyone, a very special letter arrived today," she announced with a mysterious smile. "From whom?" asked Helen, curious. "From the mayor. He wants to give us an official city honor for the center's work." "How wonderful!" exclaimed Dorothy. "Well deserved." "But there's more," continued Melissa. "He wants to name a city street after Hope Matthews." Hope was speechless. He wants to name a street after me. That's right, Mom. In recognition of your example of dignity and forgiveness, and for the positive impact our story has had on the community. My God, whispered Hope, moved. From being accused of theft to having a street named after me. Life really does take some turns. And beautiful turns they are, said Jack, hugging his mother-in-law. When will the ceremony be? Asked Isabella, excitedly. Next month, on the centre's 5th anniversary. Helen clapped her hands with joy. We'll have to organize a beautiful party to celebrate. I'm already planning the menu, announced Dorothy enthusiastically. Richard looked at Hope, who was still processing the news. Mrs. Hope, you deserve every possible honor. Your dignity in the midst of suffering is an example to all of us. I never imagined I would be recognized for something like this, she said humbly. I always thought I would be remembered as the nurse who was accused of theft. And now you will be remembered as the woman who turned injustice into hope, said Melissa, kissing her mother's face. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, Melissa lay awake thinking about everything that had happened over the past 5 years. She looked at her husband, sleeping beside her, listened to the soft sound of her children's breathing in the next room, and felt immense gratitude for everything they had achieved. She got up quietly and went to the bedroom window, from where she could see the garden illuminated by the moonlight. Right there in that house 5 years ago, she had found a photo that changed her life forever. Thank you, God, she whispered, looking up at the sky, for not letting me give up, for putting good people in my path, for giving me such a wonderful family. The next morning during breakfast, Helen made a proposal that surprised everyone. Everyone, I was thinking about something during the night, she said, with a special sparkle in her eyes. What is it, Mrs. Helen? Asked Melissa. How about we throw a big 5th anniversary party for the center to coincide with the inauguration of the street named after Hope? What kind of party? Jack wanted to know. A party that would bring together all the families who have been helped by the center over these 5 years. It would be a celebration of love's victory over injustice. What a beautiful idea, said Isabella excitedly. It would be like a big family reunion. I love the idea, Melissa agreed. It would be so moving to see all those people again and find out how they are doing. And it could have music, dancing, food, added Dorothy, already planning the event in her head. Richard smiled, seeing the enthusiasm of all the women in the family. Then it's decided. I'll arrange everything to make it the most beautiful party this city has ever seen. Hope, who was feeding her granddaughter, stopped to listen to the conversation. Are you sure you want to throw such a big party because of me? Mom, said Melissa affectionately, the party isn't because of you. It's because of all the people who were helped through your story. It's a celebration of hope. And it will be beautiful to see how a simple photograph found by chance did so much good for so many people, observed Jack. It wasn't by chance, said Hope with conviction. It was at the right time, in the right way, for the right people. The following 2 months were intense with preparations. Helen coordinated a real military operation to organize the event. Isabella handled the invitations and contacted the families. Richard took care of the structure and suppliers. Dorothy planned a menu fit for a royal party. Jack handled security and logistics. Melissa supervised everything and helped wherever it was needed. And Hope, even with her limitations, gave suggestions and approved every detail. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and forgiveness. Do you believe Hope made the right decision by forgiving the Anderson family? And what do you think about the importance of never giving up the search for the truth? Leave your honest opinion in the comments and tell us where you are following us from. Thank you for your company on this exciting journey. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart.